Hello and welcome to another episode of Happy Plants, brought to you by the Cannabis Certification Council and our wonderful sponsors, starting with Boveda and Smokey's Cannabis Company, AM 420. There's so many great ones. Bonafides Laboratory. I'll do some at the end too, because I should have had it in front of me. So in any event, welcome to this latest episode of Happy Plants. Today we're going to be talking about what to do once you've got the product. We've had episodes talking about growing it, managing the grow, harvesting it, the research you do before you go to the store, the conversations you have in the store. Now we've gone through all of that and you have got your fabulous cannabis products, and it's a question of how to get the most out of it. So we've got a really great panel of experts once again here for you today. I'm really excited to have our moderator, a returning guest on the show, Joanna Silver, the author of Growing Weed in the Garden. And I'm going to just turn it over to Joanna to introduce the rest of the panel. There is her fabulous book and its pretty cover. Thank you for doing that plug, and welcome, Joanna. Thank you so much for whatever you're doing, hosting, moderating.
Thank you. Yeah, we'll see. The jury's still out. Thank you for color coordinating with my book.
You're welcome.
Ben, which almost has its year anniversary of coming out on March 24th, 2020, which is a date I'm sure you remember for a book coming out and not anything else going on in the world. Yes, my name is Joanna Silver. Just quickly about me, I spent 10 years at Sunset Magazine in the very mainstream gardening world, and pivoted to cannabis when I lost my job and got asked by the San Francisco Chronicle to grow weed in my backyard and write about it. And a lack of just straightforward gardener type of information led me to write a book, a beautiful book about cannabis. So that's how I'm here. I am not a giant user, and so I have more questions than expert advice on this one. And I would like to I'm going to let everybody introduce themselves. So Claire, you're up.
Hey everybody, thank you so much for having me, Ben and Joanna, Jamal, Rachel. I'm really excited to be able to chat with you guys about how we're enjoying our cannabis, how we're protecting our cannabis going forward. My name is Claire Erickson, and I manage industry affairs for Boveda. And if you're not familiar with us, we are the original Terpenes shield. Our specialty is in two-way humidity control. So a really cool product that's doing hard work to protect your cannabis. So again, thank you so much for having me.
Thank you for being here. And Rachel, let's hear from you.
Thank you so much for having me again. This is my third episode, so I'm super excited to be a part. So I work with the Cannabis Alliance, and I work really heavily into understanding education when it comes to the retail side of the canna world. I do a lot of training with bud tenders and them understanding the importance of their role being the front line, that direct connection from the consumer to the retailer. Or the plant for that matter. So I really stress that importance and teach the 5 steps to the sale. And also I'm a woman of weed, and I work with a lot of other canna moms and canna women just for empowerment reasons and being a really great advocate for the plant. So thanks for having me.
Thank you for being here. I'm excited to talk more with you. And last but hardly least is my buddy / total expert, Jamal. Will you tell us a little bit about who you are?
Gosh, thanks, Joanna. My name is Jamal Baker. I have been growing cannabis for around 20 years. I've smoked cannabis in about 4 or 5 different countries. I love to talk about weed, love to talk about different strains, how to smoke it. I really love geeking out with all of you guys, and I look forward to our conversation.
These are your credentials, how many countries you've smoked weed in?
Yes, definitely.
Jamal selling himself a little bit short on what he actually knows. So this one is about how to store your weed, how to use your weed. Maybe you've grown it like I have and have a bunch of bud that you want to protect. or maybe you're walking into a dispensary for the first time or the millionth time, wanting to try something out. And so one of the things we talked about when we were prepping for this is really like where to start if you're someone who has never purchased cannabis before, and you walk into a dispensary and you see these words sativa and indica. And I think we should talk a little bit about where these terms come from and the ways in which they are and are not accurate. Jamal, will you tell us how we got these words?
Sure. Well, basically, sativa refers to a cannabis strain that it has more of a upper effect and is really more of an equatorial strain, closer to the equator. In general, plants that are closer to the equator take a lot longer to flower, and the chemical composition of the finished product is has a certain type of terpene content to it. So there's certain types of smells that it lends itself to, and therefore there's certain types of effects. Those effects are stereotypically more upper, more trippy, maybe more in the head, and also a lot rarer these days. So that would be a sativa. An indica would be a strain that is more from mountainous areas. The term indica actually means like from India, but they're more from like Afghanistan and Pakistan. They flower very quickly. The terpene content in the buds is such of like an earthy type of smell, and usually lends itself to more of a sleepy and relaxing type of high. Now I'm saying usually because there's always exceptions to these different rules. But what makes this, I guess, such a hot button topic is that nothing now is really a pure sativa or pure indica. Everything that people in the United States smoke is generally a hybrid, so a combination of both. And the reason for that is that cannabis has been, in a term, evolving for the past 40 years or so, and it's just been continuously crossed into each other, into all of these different things. So it's very, very rare that there is a pure sativa or even a pure indica. They are around, but how this comes into like more of a sticky mess is that, you know, all of these different, the majority of varieties are hybrids, so they're a little bit sativa or a little bit indica. They're just a combination of both. And then those ones are crossed with others that are a combination of both. So really there's so much stuff in there, so many different ways. Plus this has been an illegal industry for so long. So people don't know for sure all, you know, the genealogy of all of these things because it was illegal. So people didn't write it down.
Right. So from an experience, I'm cutting you off, sorry. So from an experiential level, like when somebody's walking into a dispensary, Rachel, my mind was sort of blown talking with you the other day, like how do these terms fall short, right? Like if I walk in and I'm like, I'm looking for a sativa, what should I actually be asking for? Or is that even the right starting point?
Yeah, so I usually like to use the phenos as that pathway to ask the questions. It then comes back to the bud tender to ask those questions, because a lot of times the consumers that come in, they don't know. They're just like, we know pheno, we know we don't want to be in the couch. We know, you know, they associate sativa, particular pheno. What are you doing with the sativa? Are you going to play video games and you need to be alert? Are you going to go watch a soccer game? Are you going to go hang out with friends? Are you trying to have fun? Or are you trying to be focused? So then you start to have that conversation and you start to build rapport with that consumer. And they start to tell you, oh man, I'm going to do this all day and I just need to keep going because I had to drop my kid off at practice. I got to do this. I got to do that. So then you're going to start to lean towards those ATFs, those green cracks, versus say maybe something more euphoric like a golden pineapple, or something along those lines. So then you start to build that experience with the consumer to make them want to come back and have that conversation again.
How do you know what something does? Is it just from years of like you've smoked every single one of them?
It's that combined with just the passion for the plant. I do a lot of reading. I got my mind blown about terpenes about 5 years ago when I came into the industry, and I was like, what are you talking about, this entourage effect? What do you mean? Like, this is a thing and it's a part of the experience of why I'm feeling these feelings when I'm experiencing a heavy indica or a functioning sativa. So then and then I realized that terpenes were in everything that we were smelling and eating. And it was just fascinating to me that I tend to be more myrcene inclined, and I like that functioning yet stony type of feeling, which comes with high myrcene strains. So like the Gorilla Glues and the Dutch Treats. So then it kind of, I always say it's kind of like Pokemon cards. You always want to like experience one or another, and I'll do all these things, and it's just a part of the experience. And then you want to go out and find those strains. We're like, I want to feel this way. I read the Cannabis Pharmacy. That was like my first book that I picked up. And it's fascinating. I still go to it on a daily basis, reading about it, understanding the strains better, and then just having that passion combined with just understanding how my endocannabinoid system kind of fires off really benefited me in being a patient, treating myself with cannabis.
And Claire, I want to turn to you for terpenes, but first, just because we kind of went there, I think like what gets really confusing is, and something we were talking about, is this like, are we using it medically? Are we not? And a little bit of like the history that I get that I don't know super well. So when it was just medically legal, everybody needed to talk about their medical conditions. And now that it's recreational, you can't, like a bud tender can't be advising you based on your medical conditions. Is that accurate? Is that where we stand? And like, what is our endocannabinoid system? And we were sort of getting into this idea, because full disclosure, something we were talking about was the fact I have an autoimmune disease, and everybody tells me, you know, to try weed and try CBD and try this, try that, and it's really effing annoying. And one of the things that we were talking about was that stress as an underlying condition to all disease. I actually used this in a talk last night, because I'm like the last person to advise people what to do medically, but I was just really inspired by us talking about stress being the underlying precursor to so much disease. And that is like, that I can get behind, and that if you can find a cultivar or a pheno or a strain or whatever word you want to use, that relieves your stress, then you're like, sign me up. That sounds like a good place to start. Where do you start for like somebody who's like, is it about getting as high as possible? Like, where would you start with someone? That's for you, Rachel. Or Claire. I saw you lean in for the unmute and talk about terpenes. Like, what is a terpene? Is it just fancy speak for essential oil?
Yeah, well, first of all, Rachel, I don't know anything about Pokemon cards, but clearly variety is the spice of life. So terpenes kind of fulfill that for us. Where terpenes are concerned and where they're affecting our health is they're really these volatile little chemical compounds, which are essentially the oils that you're smelling in cannabis flower. And what you're smelling is those compounds evaporating out of the trichome and into the headspace of your jar or your container or whatever you're storing your cannabis flower in. So why these little guys are so important is because they are really the compounds that are steering your high. They're the compounds that are driving the effect of the cannabis. So going back to a therapeutic standpoint, Joanna, to your point, specific terpenes have been found to have specific effects on certain disease states. And one of those is obviously inflammation in the body. Like you said, we know that inflammation is the root cause of a multitude of health problems. And so cannabis, one of the ways that it helps specifically is to reduce some of that inflammation. So that's a really good starting point for thinking about how cannabis is helping with therapeutic response. Going back to what Rachel was saying, like, how do you pick and choose or help a customer decide what they're looking for? I think that there's it's a fact that there's a really common misconception about cannabis that the higher THC level is what you want. Like the entire industry is being driven by THC and getting that max amount of potency. But what consumers are failing to understand is that terpenes and other compounds are really contributing to the overall effect of cannabis.
And how do we know that cannabis impacts inflammation, reduces it? Like, is there a preferred delivery method? You know, do we have the studies in people yet? Where are we? That's for whomever wants to answer it. Nobody's gonna answer. Okay, there we go.
I'll take a little stab. I think, you know, we're getting this information from a variety of sources. When we think about cannabis research, especially from a medical capacity and looking at serious disease, we think of Israel and all the research that they're doing there. We know that Israel is really like the hotbed of medical cannabis research. In the United States, there's a ton of exciting organizations here that are starting to look at different implications of cannabis use. Specifically, there's an organization called the Clinical Cannabinoid Science Consortium. It's a mouthful, but I was introduced to them by a colleague, and reading through their information, it's amazing what they're starting to divulge and study, and how they're putting things together to tie specific terpenes and compounds to disease states.
Yeah, it's interesting. I sat on a panel earlier this year, and there was somebody from Israel, and he couldn't speak about cannabis from anything but an extreme, like, medicalized system. Like, that is the only way it is handled. And then somebody on the panel, this is the beauty of COVID, was from Argentina. And when COVID hit there, and they legalized, they classified it as essential, it was essentially all that it was doing was opening the door for people to grow at home. And the Israeli was like horrified that this was, you know, that it was these two totally different ways of handling it, right? Like, one is totally medical and one is totally cottage at home, which I think just speaks to the different approaches to health and having different options and not always knowing where to turn, the herbalist or, you know, the pharmacy. That's not a question, but I'm interested in, like, Rachel, we were talking about the endocannabinoid system and the Knox family, and I don't know, will you speak a little bit about that and what's inspiring you in that realm?
Yeah, absolutely. I met Dr. Rachel Knox. We have the same name. It's always easy to remember somebody that has the same name as you. At a convention at the Tacoma Dome, she was there speaking with Fairwinds, which is like a medical, or they're one of the only DOH compliant farms in Washington. There's only two, actually, Trailblazing Productions and Fairwinds. So she opened my mind to this endocannabinoid system, and then basically explained it. You know, I came up to her and I was like, well, why is something that maybe, you know, percentage was what I was preaching. And I was like, why is something that's at 13% affecting me differently than something that is 25%? And then she started talking to me and explaining to me that, you know, that the endocannabinoid system is like a fingerprint. Me and Joanna could be putting our fingerprints or thumbprints side by side right next to each other. And from the naked eye, we can both tell that it's a fingerprint. But then if you have the skills and the studies and the education, you can kind of go into that fingerprint and see that they're actually different from each other. Same thing kind of goes with strains and terpenes. There's people that have been afraid because they had one strain or one edible 30 years ago and it spazzed them out and they ran outside and were singing and it was crazy and they'll never touch it again. But we also want to, you know, I will incorporate just raw plant material in my, I'll put like leaves or trim or things of that nature just right into my smoothies, replace it with like kale or spinach, or just add it in there. And there's just a lot of medicinal properties just from that raw plant material as well.
So how do you guys like to consume your weed?
I'm all about vaporizing mostly. There's so many great devices out there now, and the real beauty of them is the ability to control that burn temperature. So you're not like scorching your cannabis, so you're not getting that harsh throat burn from something that's maybe been stored at an RH level that's too dry. And also vaping, you know, you're really getting like that full terpene experience. So you're really able to taste the flavors come through and to have that full palate experience. So that's my preferred mechanism. I would say also as a mother and as a human being, you know, in 2020, there's so many great gummies and small edibles that make consumption not only discreet, but easy and approachable from a daily sort of like functional dosing standpoint. So that's where my loyalties lie.
Claire, have you ever grown your own?
I have not. However, I live in Montana and we recently legalized. So I am so looking forward to growing starting this year. And I think this is a really exciting place to be in, a time to be living in as members of the cannabis community, because so many of us are now just getting this opportunity to legally grow from a recreational standpoint. So looking forward to that. I have Joanna, I have your book right here. I have all my other books lined up. I've been doing my reading and yeah, looking forward to getting some seeds in the ground this spring.
Claire, did you say that blueberry was one of your favorite strains?
Yes, yes, it is. It's great. And I was gifted some blueberry seeds.
Nice.
The original DJ Short blueberry seeds this past year. So I have those and I'm like coveting them, waiting
Nice.
for the right moment, you know, to get them going. So.
And per your question, Joanna, like a good anti-anxiety strain would be for sure blueberry and things in general from DJ Short. And that's kind of like one of his things was stuff that alleviated anxiety.
How do you like to consume weed, Jamal?
Gosh, I mean, any way I can get it. I had a volcano for 18 years. It just broke, but that's like a sweet vaporizer. So I love vaping, love smoking doobies, love taking bong rips. I make lotion for my family. So there's many people in my family who have like neck pains and knee pains. I've been recently using it for hand pains. And it definitely works. Like it's one of those things, the way you can tell it works is because if it didn't, people would just kind of be like, you know, I'm cool on it, but people will like really come back and ask for it over and over again. And it's super simple and it's pretty empowering because like once people realize how easy it is, it's like one thing to kind of put their health in their own hands. And like, you're not really like, it's safe enough. Like, so basically what you do is you take your weed, you take your coconut oil or your olive oil or your shea butter, whatever you want to do to make lotion, and you cook it with weed. You strain out the material, and then you have this infused oil or butter, and you can use that in its raw form, or you can mix it with whatever you'd like. So it's really as complicated or as simple as you want it to be. But it really works. And it's one of those things, like it doesn't work for everything, but I'll tell you when it works, it works.
Jamal, I was like internally laughing. I was in a hockey tournament this winter and took a couple bad spills because I'm just figuring it out. And so before like our games, I was rubbing, you know, my creams like all over my tailbone to try to get ready for the game and alleviate some of that pain. And I think it really is effective. It's a great method of delivery.
Yeah, it's a great method of delivery. It's, you know, it's simple. Yeah, I mean, I can't say enough about it.
Jamal, do you use like I know that you grow your own, to put it mildly. What do you use for doobies versus what do you use for lotion?
So I guess like the pecking order.
Also, I've never said doobies, so sorry.
Probably like the pecking order of like graded materials. You would have like your flowers, or your biggest flowers would be like your AA, your AAA, like your head stash that you're gonna smoke, and then your trim and lower buds. So the ones that are smaller, more popcorny or like looser, you would use to make hash or make edibles or make whatever concoction you're going to make with them. Usually with your smaller material. Now, some people are really spoiled and they make edibles with the top nugs. Or, you know, if you are desperate, you can smoke the shake. You know, you can really do however you need to do it. But, you know, it gives you the opportunity to kind of like take your health into your own hands. Also, I like to make certain things because then when I'm buying it from other people, I know the amount of effort that was put into it. And so, you know, you give respect where it's due. Like sometimes I buy lotion, a little 4-ounce container that's like $30. But for me, we'll make like a gallon of lotion and that will cost us like $50 or something for like a huge tub. So, you know, it's all part of the process and like being connected with your medicine.
How do we get our hands on that 50-gallon tub of your lotion, Jamal?
You know, would be glad to share it with you or, you know, teach you how to make it. It's so easy. Yeah, it's really shocking how easy it is. The main trick with lotion is having somebody who knows how to make lotion, because then they can make it professional and not just kind of, you know, functional block of some sort of lotion. And mine, which is like a little bit in between. But I mean, I'm sure Rachel knows about lotions and those kinds of things at legal shops. They have some super nice ones that work great.
Rachel, how do you like to consume your weed?
Primarily flower, but I just really try to create like a balance as far as just keeping a plateau of having enough cannabinoids in my system. I suffer really bad from anxiety. And so DJ Short Blueberry is like the strain for me, the go-to when I just need to just take a break from the anxiety attacks and just kind of chill out, as well as if I need to eat as well, because sometimes when I stress, I don't eat. So, but I'm a big flower girl. I feel like the terpenes are just the most present in flower. That's kind of what I grew up on. All this other stuff is kind of new age and not necessarily something I'm not on board with, but just the way I grew up on. I'll do the pens and stuff for discretion edibles, but when I do edibles, I usually do RSO because I'm trying to reach a certain milligrams of for my dosage. So
Can you tell us what RSO is?
Yeah, it's Rick Simpson oil. It's literally like full spectrum plant extract. It tastes very planty. Just think of very raw, the rawest plant material you can receive. It looks like tar or molasses. The darker, the better, in my opinion. Some people actually will like remove the fats and lipids from RSO and market it as such. But if you're a true RSO consumer, you know that it needs the fats and lipids in order for it to be RSO in a way. So I am just a huge advocate for the plant in general. So the rawest I can get. I have a new backyard. I just recently moved to California. So I have a new backyard that has space for me to grow some beautiful plants underneath this Cali sun. So I'm really excited to kind of grow my own.
And how do you all store your weed? I'll go first. So I have several like locking stainless steel things, which do great. I throw a Bovida pack in, I'm good. I like the 58% humidity. I learned recently, I think from you, Jamal, I was asking why like or it might have been you, Claire, somebody like why they use the like 60 something percent is like standard, and learned that it's because it makes it a little heavier and you can get more money when you're selling it. Is that true? Am I like saying things that I shouldn't out loud? But I have found that for me personally, I like it at more of a 58% thing. Having said that, I also had them in these like supposedly vacuum sealed containers, glass, and I enjoyed the terpenes every time I walked by for the last few months, and have just been too lazy to deal with it. So I now have some old like too dried out weed. So after you tell me how you store your weed, I want to know what I do with my old dried out weed. But how do y'all store your weed?
Yeah, shameless plug. I obviously store with Boveda. It's so easy. It makes it like literally you open this little humidity pack and pop it right in your container. You know, we would recommend something that's a high barrier packaging system. So a lot
What does
of
that
like
mean?
your old school plastic baggie, you know, that you used to get from like your buddy or your dealer or whoever, you know, you were getting your product from. That's not doing its job to preserve all the good stuff, all the terpenes and cannabinoids in your cannabis. So usually I just use a glass jar. I think, Joanna, maybe what you're talking about is a sea vault, the little, you know, like jar
Yeah.
that snaps
What did
down
I
the
do
stainless steel
wrong?
container. Nothing. You did nothing wrong.
It didn't, but I smell it every time I walk by.
Do you have Boveda in it?
Yeah. It's
Then
not you
just
though.
grew-
It's
then you just grew super good weed, girl.
oh,
Because essentially that's what you're doing when you're
of
using.
course. Buy my book. Just kidding. Keep going.
Yeah. Essentially, when you're using humidity control like Boveda, that it's an all natural saltwater solution. So it's keeping your flower at equilibrium and forming a monolayer of water over the trichome. So it's really like locking all the goodness inside. So usually when you're storing with something like Boveda with the saltwater sachet, you're opening that up and you're maybe not getting like that regular nose hit that you think about from cannabis. But that's because when that happens, when you're getting that full huge hit of aroma, that's actually all the terpenes evaporating off your cannabis. And once they're gone, you're never getting those back. So really humidity control is an integral part. Let's see, keep it out of the light for sure. I'm just using glass jars. So I'm like shoving those kind of in the back of a drawer, you know, somewhere away where kids can't get into them as well. And then there are a lot of great little like personal containers. Story is a brand that we like to use. They make some really cool, just like personal sizes of containers for carrying small amounts and storing smaller amounts of cannabis. So definitely check those out. And they have lots of pretty colors. So bonus.
I have to say, I'm really not a big user, but obviously I grow my own and it smells amazing. And I will say that for the first year, I finally used a vaporizer and like tasted it for the first time ever, like tasted the cherry, tasted the lemon. And it was amazing. It's been absolutely amazing this year, a total game changer to burn something at a lower temperature. I could see myself getting into it much more than I ever could have. Jamal.
Yeah, I have a tip for storing weed. If you don't trim your weed, it stays much longer because each one of those cuts is just kind of like a bruise and oxidation and a chance for those trichomes to break off. So like the untrimmed weed is almost like a little cocoon where like protection also keeps it at high ideal humidities, keeps out the light. So this is the first year I've actually been taking weed and storing it untrimmed. And, you know, then when I'm ready to revisit it, I can then trim a bunch up and it should be, it's actually a bit fresher. So if you're lazy, you don't want to trim all of your weed all at once, it makes it a lot easier. You know, for people who grow outdoor, you know, you really do need to like have good techniques for saving it properly.
Yeah, I mean, everyone I spoke to when I was writing the book would have all of these, you know, would give me their complicated trimming lessons and then would say, but I store mine untrimmed. I store my own untrimmed. And here's the reasons why. And so it's absolutely what I also do and recommend. And it's so much less laborious right off the bat. And then the buds look amazing. Everybody's impressed. But I like what you're saying about also not injuring the plant. Rachel, you were telling us about like oils on your joints.
Yes. So I am a everyday user. It is my medicine. I utilize it all the time. So sometimes I like to be my own mad scientist when it comes to kind of finding what I feel my endocannabinoid system is calling for. So I'll go and buy some premium flour, and I'll get a nice viscous oil and paint it on the outside with a paintbrush, and then roll that bad boy in some keef until it's fully coated on the outside. I kind of actually have a little bit of an example right next to me, believe it or not. So it kind of looks something like this at the end. And then I just enjoy and go from there. It kind of allows me to be more so finding, because sometimes they'll coat it in an oil that might not respond well to my endocannabinoid system. So just to have that kind of power over what I'm consuming and what I'm putting in my body.
So
I don't think
I love what Rachel is talking about. I totally like putting oil on like the papers, which is a great way to medicate. I used to live in British Columbia, and what we used to do there is we would take some hash oil, heat it up, break up some weed, and then put it into the hash oil and mix it together, and then roll the joint like that. And the weed actually soaks up the oil. And then you roll that up and smoke it, and it just hits forever. It's so delicious.
Jamal, when I first met Jamal when I first started growing, he worked at Berkeley Indoor Garden, the like iconic grow store around here. And you know, I'm like a mom, and I'm like not a big user, and he's trying to get me to make bubble hash from like the first time he meets me. Which I have still not taken him up on learning. I probably should. I don't even like know what bubble hash is or why I should be consuming it. By the way, I consume super low dose. I like grow the beautiful weed, and then I buy the little gummies that are probably like crap distillate, but I like knowing exactly the amount that I'm putting in my body so that's something that I don't totally know how to reconcile.
Yeah, I mean, you know, everybody has their own place in the, you know, in this whole thing. So, you know, I would just say like it's empowering to be able to get, you know, as high as you'd like to be, and know that it's safe, and know that what you're getting, you know, is from a safe source, and know that you're not going to get too drunk. And like, you know, it's a nice thing to be able to get super blazed and then fall asleep and wake up, and you know, and that's it.
What are the dangers that you speak of? Because like nobody's ever OD'd on weed. Is it like chemicals?
Well, I mean, yeah, like for example, like the chemicals of what's in the weed, or choosing to use some other substance besides weed, really is like the dangers that I was, you know, referring to. Yeah, I mean, as long as you have clean weed, you'll be okay. And especially if you smoke it, I mean, you could probably OD easier eating too much weed than you could from smoking too much weed.
Yeah, see, like, correct me if I'm wrong here, but it seems like a lot of the problems with edibles have subsided over the past couple of years, like since we've legalized more in the rec world. You know, I know there used to be people just getting way too baked off cookies and brownies and all kinds of stuff, and those homemade goods, but it seems like that isn't occurring as often. And I'm assuming that's because people are going to a dispensary and getting products that have been tested, they're, you know, regulated, there's dosing included on the packaging. So especially for first-time users or more novice users, I think that's a real positive part of, you know, the regulatory environment.
Well, definitely in California, I mean, like edibles max out at like 50 milligrams. So
do you know how high I would get off of 50 milligrams? But anyway, sure, that's where they max out. So high.
What is
do it sometime, like Jamal.
In Seattle, Rachel?
What was the question, Jamal? Say that again.
Oh, regarding edible dosage. We were just talking
like on a daily basis.
Oh, I guess we were talking about like consumers and like worrying about people eating too much. And
I usually tell them all the time, slow's the way to go. If they're that first time user, it affects everybody differently. Everybody's metabolism is different. Everybody just responds to things differently. So In Washington, they have 10 milligram pieces. You max out at 100 milligrams. So you can get a drink that has 100 milligrams or something like that. But I always tell them slow's the way to go. If they don't feel something after about 90 minutes, to try to, double what they took or whatever they're most comfortable with, because you don't want to scare somebody away from edibles. Joanna was saying 50 milligrams would, put her through the roof. And I probably start my day with 250 milligrams of RSO. So it's just, everybody's so different when it comes to that edible game. But if I have something that says it is infused with bubble hash, I eat like a peanut butter with infused bubble hash, it'll floor me. And it could be easily 100 milligrams. So I think it's really all about the intake, what you're eating it with, as well as how you're taking it and making sure you're dosing it the right way so you know exactly what your body can tolerate.
For sure. I mean, definitely that sounds almost like more like medical doses as opposed to like, a recreational dose. Like I know like if I'm in sort of like serious medical pain, I might, eat some RSO oil, like straight up you're eating oil. Yeah, I mean.
We have a question.
I mean, I grew up on the medical days, so I was getting the cherry bomb 10 packs, and each cherry bomb was 100 milligrams. So that tolerance, I think, definitely was built in the medical days. So when recreational came about, it made me quickly realize that I needed to make my own.
Yeah, I used to have an edibles company called Irie Ice Cream, and these were like, I guess, in the days pre knowing how many milligrams was in anything, so it was just kind of like a guess. And so like I would say ours were between like 50 and 75 milligrams, depending on the batch of whatever we were using. But yeah, the dispensary loved it because ours was the cheapest, strongest edible there was. Quick plug, if you guys, you can make edible milk. If you just infuse milk and take shots of it or make ice cream or whatever, it will get you super lit, guaranteed.
Why? Milk is just because of the oil, because of the fat?
So yeah, so basically when you're making edibles, the fat is what attaches to the THC. So the more fat you have, the more THC it can pull from that. Also, things like butter, there's just not a large volume of it. And when you use milk, there's such a huge volume of it. So there's just tons of little fat molecules to pull onto that weed and pull it out. And, like what you're left with is, kind of gnarly raw, but like, I made a company off of taking weed milk and turning it into ice cream. It's absolutely delicious. And a shot of it will floor you.
Well, I'll tell you, man, equal parts coconut oil and peanut butter keep my kid pooping. So oil's amazing. There's a question in the Q&A, and Ben is telling me it's from a wonderful person who does compliance for Kiva in the North Bay. So our question is from Nisha is he said, Jesus, too much. I think the chat's supposed to stay private, but oh well. What questions are good to ask to ensure you're purchasing clean weed? Like, how do you know with these edibles I'm buying, like that are, I don't really know what they are. They're cute little gummies with savvy millennial packaging. Is it clean?
I have 3 letters. I like me a good old COA. I want to see, what is present in that cannabis. Every product in Washington state has to have a COA attached. And I've noticed that here in California, they could be available and sometimes they cannot. And if they're not, I'm not really interested in that product. I don't necessarily ask for the COA every time I come in. But to know that it's available to me is very reassuring. A lot of times there's QR codes on the packaging that you can pull up that COA information as well. So that's super helpful.
I had no idea.
Yeah, I
Claire?
would say ask questions. Don't be nervous to ask questions. the bud tenders, and whoever else you're coming into contact, people that are recommending products, they should have that information. And if they don't, then that's probably a red flag that maybe you're not getting what you're thinking you're getting, or you're not getting something that's at the quality level that you're looking for. So plug for the Cannabis Certification Council. Also, you will soon be able to verify your weed has been grown organically with their organically grown seal. So that's an exciting thing coming up for them and for the industry in general.
It truly is. While I want to wrap up, and somebody's asking how to keep up with all of us. So maybe that's a good opportunity for us to go through and talk about how people can reach us, where to find us. Jamal.
Hey, I'm on Instagram at Farmer Danger Bee. And
But are you still private?
on Instagram?
Weren't you? You're private.
Oh, I mean, I guess you just have to follow me. Yeah, you can follow me on Instagram if you'd like, Farmer Danger Bee. And yeah, be well.
Wait, Jamal, why don't you tell the good people what your next big project is?
Oh, I'm actually starting a seed company. It's going to be called Iley Seeds, and I'm going to be focusing on cultivars that grow well in people's backyards, and specifically across the whole United States, because as the United States becomes legal, people want to grow in their yard plants that will work for them and that have terpene profiles that people love, like blueberry and other stuff that gets you super lit. So yeah.
Jamal, what's the seed company named after?
Oh, Iley Seeds, named after my daughter Iley.
How old is she?
She's 4 months old, and so, you know, perhaps one day she'll be taking over Iley Seeds when she's 18 or 21, or hopefully she has a better job.
Rachel, how do people find you?
You can reach me on LinkedIn. My first and last name, RACHAEL BROWER, or Instagram, Showtime32, spelled out just like it sounds. Think Magic Johnson from the Lakers.
I'm looking you up right now. I'm connected to these other two on Insta. Claire, how do we find you?
I am Instagram at Boveda_Claire, CLAIRE. I am also on LinkedIn. So I love hearing from people on there. You know, we're always investigating new partnerships and ways that we can work together to just really make the industry look at quality parameters and the way that we can help each other and, you know, elevate companies and partners that are really trying to do things right together. So happy to have any outreach there.
And I'm in all of those places too. In my Instagram is Jojo Silver, and it's turned into gardening with my son during COVID. And my book's available anywhere books are sold, and Ben's back on, which means he wants to wrangle us all.
No, that was great. And Joanna, plug away. Do you want to talk about your next project?
I have a next project. What is my next project?
Are you writing another book?
What's the subject? If you have a book idea for me, third book, slide into my DMs.
With creative ideas, and maybe she'll give you a creative credit or something. I really just want to thank the panel, Rachel, Jamal, Claire, and Joanna, for moderating and keeping it moving. You guys covered a really wide amount of ground and topics, and I really appreciate it. Thank you to the audience for joining us live. This will be on YouTube in the next week or so for people to take in. And I just want to make sure that I do a more proper job of thanking our various sponsors and partners. Again, starting with Boveda, our title sponsor here. And thank you, Claire, for joining us today. It was a perfect opportunity to have you to talk about packaging and storage and what the benefits are of proper moisture control and those sorts of things that Boveda spends so much time talking about. Also want to thank Smokies and Grodan and Hawthorne and CG Corrigan Cannabis Good in New Mexico, 6 Labs in Michigan, legal here in Denver, Bonafides Laboratory, also in Denver, 420 AM, a dope streetwear from our friends in New Mexico as well, our great friends at Rasky Partners, and of course, Stanley Brothers. So a lot of people to thank as always, and it's really a privilege to be able to bring this kind of content and kind of freewheeling conversation to you and have it be underwritten. It's really, I would say, a privilege. So thank you guys to the panel. Thank you to the audience. Thank you to our future audience for checking us out. And we will see you next time here on Happy Plants. Thanks.